genus come. So, I will start today discussing finite groups. Okay. So, finite group, okay, if a group G has n distinct elements, okay, G is a finite group of order n. This by way of definition. Okay. Well, we have seen several examples. Okay. The permutation group is of order factorial n, whereas if I take a group like SO3 is of infinite order. SO3 is a group of rotations, okay, it's of infinite order. Okay. Now, there are several important okay, I should also define one more object, namely a system of generators for G. Okay. If we call it X, okay, is a subset of G, such that, okay, if we look at all products, if say A1, A2, AN inverse, etc. Okay. We get all of G, then X is a system of generators for G. Okay. So, it is often it is customary to give the G, okay, in terms of a system of generators and some relations. Okay. It is often, okay, G is given by a system of generators and relations. For example, the group of order n, okay, has a generator Z is generated by the single element, but its nth power is identity. So we can say that a group consists with a system of generators with one element is cyclic. Okay. A finite group. Finite group with a system of generators with one element is cyclic. Now you may ask, for example, what about Sn? Can I represent it by generators in relations? Okay. The answer is yes. Okay. So here the X is the following. Okay. So Sn consists of the following system of generators, say tau 1, tau 2, tau n minus 1, so 1, 2, 3 n minus 1. Okay. But there is a funny relation, tau I plus 1, tau I is tau I plus 1, tau I plus 1. Okay. There is one more relation, square of any tau is identity. You should think of tau I, okay, is transposition of I and I plus 1. Okay. It is a good exercise to check that if you take a transposition of I and I plus 1, you fulfill these relations. Okay. This way of presenting these relations is quite important, okay, because if you drop the last one, if you drop, okay, it is not the easy way. Okay. If the relation tau I squared is equal to identity is dropped, but keep the rest, you end up with a group which is quite horrible, called, we get a break group. Bn. This is a group which comes in discussed in two-dimensional physics, okay, and it is of infinite order. Okay. Well, every element is quite horrible, in the sense that horrible means study of this, every element not equal to identity in Bn is of infinite order. So it is huge group. Okay. People do not know how to handle this in terms of representation theory in a proper way, but it plays a very crucial role in discussing two-dimensional physics. Enough is known that you can handle it in physical context, but mathematically, from what I know, very little is known. It also plays a theory, the theory of knots and braids. This plays a big role. Okay. So this, by the way, there is a so-called word problem this is still unsolved. I think it is one of these clay problems. You know what it is for groups? If you define two groups with systems of generators in relations, you have to prove that they are the same or not the same. This is not solved in general. Okay, so I represent one group with one system of generators with some set of relations, and another group with X prime with these relations and generators, with these generators in relations. You would like to know whether they are the same group or different. Can you prove this? The answer is it is not known. Okay. So if you write two words in the generators, it is very difficult to see when they are the same. In general, there is no rule that we know, so that we can compare the two. Okay. Now, we are going towards representation theory. So, let me see some simple theorems. Okay. First is Lagrange. Okay. If G is of order n, and H a subgroup of order say n m of subgroup G, okay, then m divides n. This is something we have proved, okay, because we know that I can write like this, okay. G is a for G is a disjoint union, say I equal to 1 up to say P of Gi of H. This means disjoint. So the left course is a disjoint, so I partition it. So by comparing, you see that n is Pm. So this proves that a subgroup order of the subgroup divides the order of the group. A simple consequence of this is the following. Okay. It follows, let us say lemma or whatever it is. A group of prime order is cyclic. A group G of prime order is cyclic. Can you see the proof? Okay. You can pick any element. Okay. For take a finite group. Well, okay. So pick for let G be not equal to identity be in G. To pick any element. Okay. So I go on taking his powers. Consider G squared, and I go on doing this. U to the m. But the group G is finite. So at some point I should come back to where I started. Otherwise I will get infinite number of elements. Okay. Since G is finite, okay, there exists rho sigma, rho larger than sigma, such that g to the rho is equal to g to the sigma. Otherwise, I will go on getting newer and newer elements. Okay. This implies g to the rho minus sigma, which is g to the m, is identity. Okay. Let m be the smallest such integer. Let m be the smallest such integer. Okay. Then this is subgroup. Okay. Identity up to Gm is a subgroup of G. But G is of prime order. So, if we call the order of G by G, this m divides G is integer. But this is prime, so m is G, G is m. Okay. So, since the number of elements in H is that those in G, they are the same. Okay. And since order of H is your order of G, we can say H is G. Right. So, a group of prime order is cyclic. Okay. Now, I want to prove one more result, very simple. Okay. This is rather okay. Every group, every finite group H of order n is a subgroup of the permutation group Sn. Okay. Basically, the group acts as permutation of the elements of H. So, what do you do? Well, for let H consists of elements E, say A1, say just A1, A2 up to AN. Number them, okay. Let number them, okay, giving a distinct number NAI to AI. So, N1, N of A1 may be 1, N of A2 may be 2, whatever. So, I number them, then I consider the following, okay. I choose, then consider say sigma which takes an element B to a permutation, okay, PB, which will be n A1, n of B A1 and so on, n AN, n of B AN. So, I have given you mapping from the group element into permutations. Okay. this mapping sigma, first is sigma is 1 to 1, because since PB equal to PC implies NB AI is NC AI, right, but I have given distinct numbers to the distinct group elements. So this implies BAI is equal to CAI, because I have given numbered them differently. Okay. So B equal to C, because these are invertible. Okay. And finally, it is fairly clear that PB PC, let us say PC PB is P of CB by inspection. B will send it here, but when I have, then in the next step NBA1 will go into NCBA1, so I get this result immediately. Okay. So we have proved that C, this sigma or sigma, okay, is an isomorphism it is not on into Sn. It is not unique. Okay. There are many such sigmas. Okay. There are many such sigmas, okay, okay, depending on choice or numbering. But there is at least one. So every finite group is a subgroup of Sn. Okay. That does not mean that we know all the finite groups, subgroups of Sn. In fact, some of them were discovered only very recently. No? There are this, what is it called? The monster group, I think monster group, no, which was discovered 10 years ago or something like that. There is something called moonshine associated with monster, right?
Moonshine is about monster.
Is what?
Moonshine is about monster, about representation.
Huh.
What's monstrous about it?
It is called monster group. It's huge order. There were three they knew for some reason existed. Okay. These are the classification of simple finite groups. Okay. They were completed only recently. Okay. And what I know is that there were 3 or 4 missing, which were discovered by some roundabout way, actually from some contributions from conformal field theory, string vertex operator theory, in some other way, then they found it. You know. It is related to some lattices, Leech lattice also. But okay, they are of interest in conformal field theory, so I came across it. Now I want to show you the following. Now comes representation theory. Of finite groups. I prove to you that if we saw that every unitary representation is the direct sum, is a direct sum of unitary irreducible representations. I proved it some time ago, right? Because if you have an invariant subspace, you use the fact that the orthogonal complement is also invariant, then go on taking it apart. So it follows. So every representation equivalent to a unitary one is reducible into is a direct sum of irreducible representations. Because you can first go to take this representation, make a similarity transformation to go to the unitary one, reduce it and go back. Or you can do something else, you can change the scalar product directly in this representation to make it unitary, that also is possible. But if you are given in terms of matrices, you may want to first make the unitary transformation, similarity transformation to make them unitary, do the job here and go back. Okay. So we will now prove that every representation of a finite group G is a direct sum of not direct is equivalent to a unitary one. Okay. So it follows that every representation of a finite group can be completely reduced into direct sum of irreducible representations. Okay. So we need only to discuss irreducible representations, and in fact only unitary irreducible representations. So that simplifies the problem a lot. Okay. For let gamma dg be a representation of G. Okay. Let me assume that these are given by matrices for simplicity. Then let me form this matrix. Consider I will make a matrix C is summation on the group of D of G dagger D of G. The dagger is in the representations, whatever the scalar product is in the representation space, or if it is matrices, you can take the matrix adjoint. Now, A. First is that the C, okay, the C is a positive matrix. That is, it has no, first C is self-adjoint. That's inspection. B. All its eigenvalues are strictly positive. it has no zero eigenvalue for, okay, if I take x Cx, this is dgx dgx, right, because this is certainly positive, because the left hand side is, in particular it is positive for eigenvector, any eigenvector. So it shows, and this is the square of the eigenvector, okay, including for x equal to an eigenvector, okay, say of C, right, the Cx is some lambda x, right. So from here you see immediately, or this says lambda is non-negative, because the left hand side is lambda times xx, okay, xx is certainly non-zero, we are not choosing x to be 0. So from here you see that lambda is non-negative. In fact, lambda is strictly positive. In fact, lambda is positive. Why? What happens if lambda is 0? Lambda cannot be 0, for lambda equal to 0 implies what? If this is 0, dgx is 0, this is dgx is 0, right? What does it mean? This is an element of the group, so this is certainly invertible. So I will, right, dg has an inverse because it is representing the group element.
Actually, you want to sum that, right? I mean, you will go x comma cx equals, there should be a
Is
sum
equal to,
sum on g, right?
forgot about that.
But then what you can conclude that it's down to 0 if you have a sum on dg, sum on g, dgx is 0.
No, because each term is positive, okay, it is sum of positive terms, okay. So this is 0, but dg, but gamma is a representation, exists, because g to dg is a representation, this implies x is 0. Okay. So lambda is strictly positive. So C has a positive square root C to the half. You can do this many ways, okay. You can diagonalize it, take the square roots along the diagonals and put it back, or you can do what people call as, what is it called, functional calculus on operators. What do you mean, you know what, it is in Dirac's book. What you do is you write C as summation lambda I pi, lambdas are the eigenvalues and p's are projectors, okay, pi projector to eigenspace with eigenvalue lambda I. Right? This is your standard quantum mechanical expression. I expand the C in terms, sorry, spectral decomposition of C. So people doing this activity with operators talk about some functional calculus with operators to how to define function of C. Okay. So then square root of C is simply square root of lambda I pi, where you can take even the positive square root. Okay. So this defines C to the half, and it is invertible. So I go back and look at the following property. DGC let me do it the other way around. Yeah, let me look at it this way. D of G dagger C dg I should, let me write S if you don't mind. D of S dagger ds. What happens is you get summation G of D of GS dagger D of GS because of the group property, but this is same as C because I am just permuting the group elements. Okay. So this is C is Hermitian. So this says C to the minus half ds dagger C to the half, then here C to the half ds C to the minus half is the unit operator. Right? And C inverse, square root of inverse, C has an inverse. So it implies, so this one, so C to the half, okay, dg ds C to the minus half is unitary. So for a finite group, we have proved that every representation is equivalent to a unitary one, and hence a direct sum of irreducible ones. Okay. So hereafter we can assume unitarity if we want. Now I am going to prove a sequence of simple results, all deriving from Schur's lemma. Okay. P is a projection operator. C is an operator, yes. These are numbers. So I just take the square root of them. Here I don't do anything because Pi Pj is delta Aj, right? So if I take square of this, I get this because Pi times Pj is delta Aj Pi. So orthogonal projectors because this is a self-adjoint operator. Oh, there is no half here. Now, as I say, I am going to apply Schur's lemma to derive a sequence of orthogonality and normalization relations of these D's for unitary representations. These are analogues of orthogonality polynomials for Legendre polynomials or spherical harmonics, but I will see that you will see that I don't have to do any work. Okay, I don't have to solve differential equations or anything. I'll get the answers. That is a miracle, and let us see how it goes. Orthogonality and normalization relations. Okay. So let's say gamma G by be an irreducible representation of G of order n. Okay. Consider the following object. P is 1 over n summation G, okay, of dg dagger a dg. Let me see whether I have written it the way I have here. No, I didn't. I wrote it slightly differently. dg a d of g inverse, okay, where a, okay, is fixed sigma cross sigma matrix if gamma is sigma cross is a dg is sigma cross sigma. A is any, choose a random, picks a matrix, choose A and consider this object. You will notice that I am repeatedly using integration or averaging over the group. That is a whole trick, because then you see from here that d of sp what happens, this is 1 over n summation G d of Sg A d of G inverse d of G inverse change variables, call it G prime, then you will find that this is 1 over n summation G prime d of G prime A. So G is, yeah, so this is d of G prime inverse S yes, but this is the group property, so I can split ds, so it is PDS. So P commutes with D all S, so I apply sure. Okay. By Schur's lemma, we know that A is a multiple of the identity, so A is lambda A times unit matrix. No, sorry, you are right. P is lambda A times unit matrix, because P commutes with all the matrices. Now I choose a basis for A. A basis for A is let me call it MKL. MKL Ij is delta Ki delta Lj. Okay. Any arbitrary A is a linear combination of these what they call matrix units. Okay. Where the range of these indices is sigma. So let the corresponding lambda A be call them lambda KL. So I find from here let me do this. So I want to rewrite this equation. So I find this here lambda KL. Let me write delta Ij. Delta Ij coming from here is equal to P. Where is P? I am not saying, okay. Yeah. 1 over n summation G dg say I k, no I am not, Ij, okay, MKL Jn times dg inverse times n. I am sorry, I am getting mixed up with indices. Ij is here, so I am mn dg inverse nj. Okay. Okay. This Ij is this index and that index, but this here is delta Km delta Ln. Delta Km delta Ln. So this is equal to 1 over n summation G times dg times Ik times dg inverse times L does it make sense? Lambda Km K L Lj. Lambda KL is on the other side, I J is on the other side, is correct. But I can compute lambda KL. What will I do? From here I can compute lambda KL. How will I do it? This equation fixes the value of lambda KL. Why? I put I equal to j and take trace. Then this will cancel with this. Right? If I take I equal to j and sum, this part will give me a I equal to j and sum. This part will give me delta KL times summation j g, right? Which is the order of the group. Order of the group. Let me see if I am making mistakes, but let us see. So this is so I am getting, there is something else here. So I am getting lambda KL. So I want to substitute I equal to j sum. Here what will I get is lambda KL times sigma. Sigma is the dimension, the size of that matrix. and this is equal to, from here, 1 over n. Then when I substitute I equal to j in sum g and the g inverse, I will get a delta KL, okay, which is here delta KL. There is a 1 over n, okay, but this g summation is sitting there, so they cancel. That's I am putting too many 1 over s n, so this cancels with this. Okay, so lambda KL is fixed to be delta KL over sigma. So we have already got the some n is missing, which I am not happy. Where is the n? Yeah, that's okay, fine. So let me write down. So okay, I am getting 1 over n, right, summation g dg. Let me write it in the form I have written here, so I can prevent further errors of index. Ij d of g inverse KL is equal to n over sigma. Yeah. Actually, what over, let me write here n over sigma like this, n over sigma delta I delta IL delta JK. So I put the definition, this one n on top, lambda KL has a 1 over n, and I put it. So I got the orthogonality relation completely fixed. Okay. The only uncertainty is, it's not uncertainty, the group has rank n, is of order n, the dimension of the representation is sigma, that is it, it is irreducible. Okay. So we have a system of orthogonality relation, and you notice immediately that if dg is unitary, d of g inverse, right, KL is equal to d of g complex conjugate, let me write it like LK. So in this case, if it is in the unitary case, this takes actually a familiar form, summation g d of g, okay, Ij d of g bar Lk is equal to n over sigma delta IL delta Jk. You will see that this formula as is, with except for summation being replaced by integration on the group, will go into, will be valid for practically every group that we have got. Okay. From here you can get all the relevant orthogonality relations. So this is a very important result indeed. Okay. Now one more thing I should say is the following: if gamma dg gamma prime d prime g are inequivalent IRRs, we will get this relation 1 over n summation g d of g a d prime of G inverse is 0. Same proof, Schur's lemma, because these are, if I call this P, again Schur for d of Gp is P d prime of G. Okay. And I have said they are unequal and irreducible representations. So Schur says this is 0. So we have now got, now choose for this A basis of matrices like I did. So this implies immediately that this sum here G d of G Ij d of G inverse KL d prime is 0. Okay. This is an orthogonality relation, or this is same or in unitary case we have summation G d of G Ij d of G bar KL, I think I wrote it as Lk, is 0. Okay. So we have got the basic normalization orthogonality relation, or the representation matrices of irreducible representations of a finite group, okay, without knowing any detail about the group. So tomorrow from here I will develop the so called character formula in character theory and show that within this structure there is enough information for us to at least tell how many irreducible representations will a finite group have. Okay, you can very easily get results for telling how many irreducible representations it can have, and show that the character, which is the trace of dg in a representation G, really completely determines the representation. Okay. So we will do all that, then discuss finite groups, discuss the permutation group, then we will go on to something else.